The worn tires of Ryan's decade-old sedan hummed a monotonous tune against the asphalt, a sound usually lost beneath conversation or music, but now amplified by the weary silence that had settled over its four occupants. Ryan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the dashboard lights. Beside him, Jessica stared out at the dark shapes of trees blurring past, her head resting against the cool passenger window. In the back, Ben was slouched, feigning sleep, or perhaps actually succumbing to it after the long weekend, while Olivia traced patterns on the fogged-up rear window with her finger, her gaze distant. They were returning from Pine Lake, a weekend getaway meant to recharge batteries drained by midterms and part-time jobs. It had worked mostly. Campfire smoke still clung faintly to their clothes, and the easy camaraderie, though frayed by fatigue, remained. But now only the long stretch of highway lay between them and their own beds. "Man, I am beat," Ryan mumbled, breaking the quiet. He glanced at the GPS app on his phone mounted to the dash. Still showing over 2 hours with this traffic. The screen glowed red along their projected route, a long, angry line indicating congestion ahead. Jessica sighed, shifting. In her seat. "I just want a shower and my bed, preferably in that order." From the back, Ben stirred. "Ditto, think I might have actually inhaled a mosquito last night, feeling it buzz around my lungs." He coughed theatrically. Olivia chuckled softly, wiping a clear patch on the window. "Gross, Ben. Anyway, Ryan, isn't there another way? Like that old road Dad used to mention?" Ryan's eyes flicked back to the GPS, then zoomed out, searching. "Yeah, maybe. Whisper Creek Road. It cuts west and supposedly shaves off an hour if the highway's jammed." He tapped the screen, rerouting. The app offered the dirt road as an alternative, marked by a thin, uncertain line snaking through a vast green patch representing dense forest. "Looks like it connects back to Route 9 further down." Whisper Creek. Olivia frowned slightly. "That name rings a bell. I think I read something about it online. Local spooky stories. People saying it's bad luck or haunted." Ben snorted from the back seat, fully awake now. "Oh, here we go. Livy and her ghost stories. Dude, if it saves us an hour of sitting in traffic listening to your stomach rumble, take the haunted road. What's the worst that could happen? We get spooked by an owl?" Jessica looked uncertainly at Ryan. "A dirt road, though, at night. Is your car even up for that?" Ryan patted the dashboard affectionately. "Betsy here has seen worse. Come on, guys, it'll be an adventure. Like the final leg of the trip." He was already slowing down, looking for the turnoff indicated by the GPS. He wanted to be the hero who got them home faster, shaking off the fatigue with a decisive move. The turnoff, when they reached it, was barely noticeable, an unpaved opening in the trees, marked only by a battered, almost illegible wooden sign, half swallowed by overgrown bushes. Ryan swung the wheel, and the sedan bumped off the smooth asphalt onto the gravel and packed earth of Whisper Creek Road. Instantly, the oppressive canopy of the forest closed in above them, swallowing the faint moonlight. The air grew stiller, heavier. The rhythmic hum of the highway was replaced by the crunch of gravel under the tires and the unnerving silence of the deep woods. Ryan flicked on the high beams, cutting a tunnel through the suffocating darkness, but the thick trees seemed to absorb the light just yards ahead. The easy atmosphere from the highway evaporated, replaced by a sudden, prickling awareness of their isolation. The road ahead looked dark, narrow, and unwelcoming. The sedan pushed deeper into the woods, the gravel crunching rhythmically under. The tires, the high beams, seemed less effective here, the darkness thicker, pressing in from all sides. Inside the car, the forced cheerfulness had dissolved completely. Ben was quiet. Olivia was nervously scanning the impenetrable walls of trees lining the road, and Jessica kept casting worried glances at Ryan. He gripped the wheel tighter, his earlier confidence replaced by a knot of apprehension in his stomach. This road felt wrong. It wasn't just dark or isolated. It felt ancient and resentful of their intrusion. He was just about to suggest maybe turning back, admitting defeat, when Betsy decided for him. There was a sudden, violent cough from the engine, a sputtering gasp that made the whole car shudder. The dashboard lights flickered wildly, then dimmed to a weak orange glow. Ryan desperately pumped the gas pedal, his heart lurching. "No, no, no, not now!" The engine coughed again, weaker this time, and then silence. Utter, complete silence, save for the faint pinging of the cooling metal. The car rolled a few more yards in the residual momentum before coming to a dead stop, angled slightly towards the ditch. The remaining dashboard lights flickered one last time and extinguished, plunging them into near-total darkness, broken only by the weak beams of their phone screens as they instinctively raised them. "Oh, what was that?" Jessica whispered, her voice tight with panic. "I don't know," Ryan said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Sounded bad. Let me check." He fumbled for the hood release, the metallic click echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. Outside, the air was cold and damp, carrying the loamy scent of decaying leaves. He propped the hood open, using his phone's flashlight to peer at the lifeless engine block. It looked normal. No obvious smoke, no disconnected hoses he could see in the limited light. He wasn't much of a mechanic, but nothing screamed obvious failure. Ben got out too, stretching. Maybe just flooded it? Or the alternator finally gave up the ghost. He tried the key in the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a click. Well, isn't this just peachy? His attempt at sarcasm fell flat, edged with genuine worry. Okay, don't panic, Ryan said, trying to convince himself as much as the others. Let's try calling for help. One by one they held up their phones. Jessica shook her head, showing Ryan her screen. "No service," Olivia confirmed. "Mine too." Ben swore under his breath. "Same here. 0 bars, of course." They stood clustered, around the dead car, the feeble beams of their phone flashlights barely pushing back the oppressive darkness. The silence of the woods pressed in, immense and watchful. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of something holding its breath. Then they heard it. A faint rustling in the underbrush, just beyond the reach of their lights. "Probably just a deer," Ryan said quickly, maybe too quickly. But the rustling didn't sound like a deer. It sounded stealthier. It stopped when they stopped talking, started again when they spoke. A twig snapped sharply nearby, making them all jump. "Okay, this is officially creepy," Jessica murmured, moving closer to Ryan. Olivia shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. "I don't like this. It feels like we're being watched." Her voice was barely a whisper. Ryan scanned the impenetrable wall of trees, his flashlight beam bouncing nervously. He saw nothing but tangled branches and deep shadows. Yet, the feeling was undeniable. A prickling on the back of his neck, a sense of unseen eyes tracking their every move. He looked back at the useless car, then down the dark, forbidding road in the direction they'd come. Staying here, exposed and vulnerable beside the dead vehicle, suddenly felt like the worst possible option. Waiting for help that couldn't be. Called, waiting for whatever was out there in the dark. He made a decision. "All right," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. "Sitting here isn't doing us any good. We're sitting ducks." He looked at the others, their pale faces illuminated by the phone lights. "We stick together. We keep the lights on, and we walk back to the main road. It can't be that far, right? It's our best shot." Hesitantly, glancing fearfully into the surrounding darkness, they agreed. There was no other real choice. Leaving, the imagined security of the car felt like stepping off a cliff, but staying felt like waiting for something terrible to find them. They gathered their jackets, checked their phone batteries, and casting one last look at the inert metal shell of the car, turned to face the long, dark road back. They set off, huddled together, 4 wavering beams of phone flashlights cutting, tentative paths through the oppressive darkness. Ryan took the lead, Jessica close behind him, her hand occasionally brushing his back for reassurance. Olivia and Ben brought up the rear, Ben trying and failing to project an air of nonchalance, while Olivia's head swiveled constantly, scanning the black woods that pressed in on either side. The only sounds were their own footsteps, crunching on the gravel, and their ragged breathing, unnaturally loud in the profound silence. Walking felt different from driving, slower, more vulnerable. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig in the unseen depths of the forest sent jolts of adrenaline through them. The feeling of being watched hadn't lessened. If anything, it intensified, becoming a palpable weight on their backs. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist in their peripheral vision, always dissolving into mundane shapes when confronted directly. After what felt like an hour, though Ryan suspected it was much less, a disturbing sense of disorientation began to creep in. "Does any of this look familiar?" he asked, his voice low. "We didn't pass that weird split oak tree on the way in, did we?" Olivia shook her head, her eyes wide. "I don't think so. And the road, doesn't it feel like we've been going downhill for too long? We should have started climbing back up by now, shouldn't we?" Ben scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's dark, Liv. Everything looks different. We're just spooked." But even he couldn't completely ignore the inconsistencies. The road curved when they remembered it being straight, seemed narrower in places, wider in others. The air grew colder, carrying faint, unsettling whispers that seemed to coil around them, too indistinct to be words, yet too patterned to be just the wind. Jessica whimpered softly, grabbing Ryan's arm. It was Ben who spotted it first, a dark shape half hidden behind a thicket of thorny bushes just off the road. "Whoa, hang on. What's that?" Cautiously they approached, sweeping their lights over the object. It was a car, or what was left of one. An old model, maybe from the 70s. Rusted through in countless places, tires long rotted away, the chassis sinking into the soft earth. Vines snaked through the broken windows. It looked like it had been there for decades. "Okay, definitely didn't see this on the way in," Ryan muttered. A morbid curiosity drew them closer. The driver's side door hung open at an odd angle. Ryan hesitated, then shone his light inside. The interior was gutted, springs poking through the ripped upholstery, floorboards thick with mold and damp leaves. But nestled amongst the decay on the passenger seat was something else. A small, leather-bound diary. Olivia, her interest momentarily overriding her fear, reached in carefully and picked it up. The cover was warped and stained, but intact. She opened it gingerly. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but mostly legible, written in an old-fashioned looping script. "What does it say?" Jessica asked, peering over her shoulder. Olivia read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "October 17th, still no sign of rescue. The road seems different each time we try to walk out. The woods watch. It watches. Henry went silent last night. Heard him scream, then nothing. I think it took him. I can hear it whispering now, just outside the car." Her voice broke off. The next few pages were stuck together with dampness and mold. The last legible entry, dated October 19th, contained only 3 frantically scrawled words. "It sees me." A chilling silence fell over the group. The woods seemed to press closer, the darkness suddenly feeling less empty, more predatory. This wasn't just a creepy road. It was a place where people vanished, leaving behind only fragmented whispers of terror. The discovery didn't offer answers, only confirmation of their deepest fears. They were on a road that didn't let people leave. And whatever haunted it was still here. Ryan looked back the way they came, then ahead into the unbroken darkness. Neither direction felt safe anymore. The brittle pages of the diary seemed to emanate a coldness that had nothing to do with the night air. Olivia quickly shut the cover, dropping it back onto the ruined seat. as if it were burning her hand. No, one spoke. The implications hung heavy between them, the confirmation that they weren't the first, that the road itself felt malevolent, and that something actively took people here. The whispers in the woods seemed louder now, coalescing, almost forming mocking syllables just beneath the threshold of understanding. "Okay," Ryan said, his voice hoarse, forcing a decisiveness he didn't feel. "We keep moving, now." They turned away from the derelict car, pushing back onto the gravel path with renewed urgency, practically stumbling over each other. The relative safety of distance from that relic of past horror felt paramount, but the road ahead offered no comfort, only more darkness. And the darkness, it seemed, was starting to fight back. Jessica gasped as her phone screen flickered erratically, the flashlight beam stuttering like a dying strobe light before cutting out entirely, leaving only the phone's faint screen glow. "Ryan, my light! Mine too!" Olivia cried out almost simultaneously, her phone plunging her section of the path into blackness. Panic flared. Ryan frantically checked his own phone. The light still held, but the battery indicator had dropped alarmingly fast in the last few minutes. Ben's light was also still on, but he held it now like a weapon, sweeping its beam nervously into the trees. What the hell? They were charged! Maybe the cold, Ryan suggested weakly, but he knew it wasn't just the cold. Something else was at play, draining their resources, isolating them further. They huddled closer, relying on the two remaining lights, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen life. Just as they rounded a sharp bend, obscured by low-hanging branches, Ben tripped hard on an exposed root, sprawling onto the gravel with a cry of pain. His phone flew from his hand, the light extinguishing as it hit the ground. "Ben!" Olivia yelled, rushing to help him up. I'm okay, he grunted, scrambling to his feet, brushing off dirt and checking himself for injuries. But as he straightened up, his face went slack with terror. His eyes fixed on something just past Olivia, deeper in the woods off the side of the road, where his light had briefly illuminated before dying. "Ben? What is it?" Ryan demanded, swinging his own light towards where Ben was staring. Ben didn't answer. He was frozen, his breath catching in his throat, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. He took a stumbling step backward, then another, his eyes wide with primal fear. Ryan's light beam cut through the darkness, landing on nothing, just tangled undergrowth and the thick trunks of trees. "Ben, there's nothing that—" Then he saw it, or rather, sensed it. A distortion in the air, a patch of darkness darker than the surrounding night, impossibly tall and thin, that seemed to unfold itself from the space between two ancient oaks. It wasn't just a shadow, it was an absence of light, of heat, of sound. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, detaching itself from the trees, a vaguely humanoid silhouette that seemed both too solid and utterly ethereal. It didn't have a face, but Ryan felt with bone-chilling certainty that it was looking right at them, at Ben. This was it. The Watcher. The thing from the diary. The source of the whispers. The Watcher in the woods. It raised an arm, a long, impossibly thin appendage that seemed to stretch and elongate like cooling tar towards Ben. Ben finally broke his paralysis, letting out a choked scream, scrambling backward on the gravel, away from the reaching darkness. "Run!" Ryan bellowed, grabbing Jessica's hand and shoving Olivia forward. They didn't need telling twice. Pure, unadulterated terror propelled them down the road, away from the unfolding nightmare. Ryan risked a glance back. The figure was still there, standing silently at the edge of the woods, its elongated arms slowly retracting. It wasn't chasing them, not yet. It was just watching, letting them run, letting the fear build. They ran blindly, stumbling, gasping for air, Ryan's single remaining flashlight beam bobbing frantically, offering little real illumination. The brief, horrifying glimpse had shattered any lingering hope of a rational, explanation. They weren't lost. They were being hunted, and the hunter had finally shown itself. The rules had changed. This wasn't about finding their way back anymore. It was about survival. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to buckle, propelled by sheer terror. Only when Ryan, gasping for breath, stumbled and nearly fell did they collapse into a heaving, panicked huddle by the side of the road. Ryan's phone, miraculously, still cast its lone, weak beam, the battery indicator now a sliver of red. The oppressive silence of the woods rushed back in, replacing the sound of their frantic footsteps and ragged breathing. Ben was shaking uncontrollably, his face pale and slick with sweat. The former skeptic was gone, replaced by a man who had stared into the abyss. He kept muttering, "It almost touched me. I felt it as so cold." Over and over again. Jessica was crying silently, huddled against Ryan, while Olivia scanned the darkness around them, her expression a mixture of fear and intense concentration. The immediate threat of the visible entity had passed, but the horror lingered, shifting into something more insidious. The woods themselves seemed alive with malice. Was that a voice on the wind? Jessica flinched, looking wildly around. "Did you hear that? It sounded like my mom?" Ryan strained his ears. Nothing but the breeze, sighing through the pines. "Jess, it's just the wind." But even as he said it, a cold dread trickled down his spine. He thought he heard a low whisper of his own name, seeming to come from right behind him. He spun around, flashlight beam cutting wildly. Nothing. The Watcher wasn't just hunting them, it was playing with them. Paranoia began to weave its toxic threads through the exhausted group. Ryan saw the way Ben looked at him, the unspoken accusation. "You brought us here. This is your fault." He couldn't meet his friend's eyes, the guilt churning in his stomach. "We should have never taken this road," Ben finally spat out, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "Some shortcut. Look where it got us." "How was I supposed to know?" Ryan shot back, defensiveness flaring. "You were all for it too, mister. What's the worst that could happen?" "Guys, stop!" Olivia hissed, her voice sharp. "Fighting isn't going to help. We need to think." She closed her eyes for a moment, concentrating hard. "The legends. I remember reading fragments online, posts on old forums. People talked about disappearances, yeah, but also about the road itself being wrong, like it feeds on something." "Feeds on what?" Jessica asked, her voice barely audible. "Fear," Olivia said grimly, opening her eyes. "Panic, despair. Like the diary said, maybe it gets stronger the more scared we are. Maybe that's why it showed itself, to terrify us." A twig snapped loudly nearby, closer than before. They all froze. Ryan swept the light beam towards the sound. Again, nothing visible, but the feeling of being watched intensified, pressing down on them like a physical weight. Then, a new sound. Faint, childish laughter echoing from deep within the woods to their left. It sounded chillingly familiar to Jessica, like her little niece. She gasped, taking an involuntary step towards the sound. "Lily, Jess, no." Ryan grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "It's not real. It's messing with us." Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she struggled weakly against his grip, but it sounded just like her. The laughter faded, replaced by a low, guttural growl from the opposite side of the road. The entity was surrounding them, tightening, its invisible net expertly plucking at their deepest fears and attachments. Hopelessness began to set in, thick and suffocating. They were trapped, their resources dwindling, hunted by a thing that fed on their terror, turning their own minds against them. How could they possibly fight back against something like that? Ryan looked at his dying phone light, then at the terrified faces of his friends. For the first time, he truly believed they might not make it out of Whisper Creek Road alive. They huddled together in the encroaching darkness, the beam from Ryan's phone now pitifully weak, casting more shadows than light. The battery icon was a single blinking red sliver. Soon they would be blind. The psychological assaults seemed to lessen momentarily, as if the watcher sensed their dwindling hope and was savoring their descent into despair. Ben had lapsed back into a shivering silence. Jessica's quiet sobs were the only sound besides, the incessant low whispers of the wind, and Ryan felt a crushing weight of responsibility settle over him. He had led them into this nightmare, just as the last vestiges of hope threatened to extinguish completely. Olivia, who had been sitting with her eyes squeezed shut, concentrating fiercely, gasped. Her eyes snapped open, wide and sharp. "Wait," she breathed, her voice urgent. "The diaries and the forum posts, they kept mentioning the disappearances happening at night, always at night. And the figure, shadows. It is shadows." "Yeah, tell us something we don't know," Ben muttered bitterly. "No, listen," Olivia insisted, grabbing Ben's arm. "What dispels shadows? What fights darkness?" Ryan looked at her, a flicker of understanding dawning. "Light," he whispered. "Exactly. Not just any light. Our phones barely bothered it. But maybe intense light, sudden, bright light." Olivia's words tumbled out in a rush. "Or fire? Fire creates light and heat. It's elemental, primal. Maybe something ancient like this. Maybe it fears that." It was a long shot, based on fragments and desperate hope, but it was something, a tangible weakness perhaps. Ryan's mind latched onto it. Fire, light. Where could they get that? His eyes darted back down the road in the direction of the car. "The car," he said, the idea forming rapidly. There might be half a gallon of gas left in the tank, and the battery. It died, but maybe there's one last jolt in it if we can get the terminals clean. Enough for the headlights. The horn. Hope, fragile but fierce, sparked in the small, terrified group. It was insane. Going back towards the place they'd run from, towards the dead car that might attract the watcher, relying on a dying battery and a near-empty gas tank. But it was a plan, a gamble, their only one. "Okay," Ryan said, taking charge again, fueled by this last surge of adrenaline and hope. "Okay, here's what we do. We stick together, move fast and quiet back to the car. Olivia, you try to remember. Anything else? Anything about how it reacts? Ben, you help me with the battery and the gas siphon. We need something to burn. Jessica, you watch our backs. Yell if you see anything, understand?" Everyone nodded grimly. The fear was still there, thick and suffocating, but now it was overlaid with a desperate resolve. They weren't just prey anymore. They were going to fight back. Point of Virada 2 had arrived. The decision to turn and face the nightmare head-on, armed with nothing but a half-remembered legend and a desperate, near-suicidal plan. Ryan looked at his phone's dying light, then pushed himself to his feet. "Let's go, before this light dies completely." The journey back to the car was agonizingly slow and fraught with tension. Ryan's phone light faded until it was barely a glowworm flicker, forcing them to rely on memory and touch as much as sight. Every rustle, every shadow seemed magnified, pregnant with threat. Yet the direct psychological assaults seemed to have ceased, replaced by a heavy, waiting silence, as if the watcher was curious, letting them walk into their own desperate trap. They reached the derelict sedan, a hulking black shape against the lesser black of the night. Ryan's light finally died completely, plunging them into absolute darkness for a terrifying moment before their eyes adjusted slightly to the faint ambient starlight filtering through the dense canopy. "Okay, quick," Ryan whispered urgently. "Ben, the hood. Jess, Olivia, watch the road both ways." Working by feel and the dim screen light from Olivia's phone, which she'd kept off to conserve power, Ryan and Ben fumbled under the hood. Ryan scraped at the battery terminals with a rock while Ben located the fuel line, preparing to siphon the precious gasoline into an empty water bottle they'd luckily kept. It was painstaking, nerve-wracking work. Every scrape of rock on metal, every gurgle of siphoned fuel sounded deafeningly loud. "Anything?" Ryan breathed, connecting the terminal clamps he'd managed to clean slightly. Ben shook his head, holding the bottle now containing a meager amount of gasoline. "Not much here. Maybe enough for one good flare-up." Suddenly Jessica gasped, pointing down the road behind them. "Something's moving." They all froze. A shape detached itself from the darkness about 50 yards away. The impossibly tall, slender silhouette of the Watcher. It wasn't moving quickly, simply gliding towards them, silent and inexorable. "Now, Ryan, try it now," Ben yelled, scrambling back from the engine. Ryan dove into the driver's seat, jamming the key into the ignition and twisting frantically. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker. The dashboard lights sputtered weakly. He twisted the key again, praying. A strangled groan came from the starter, and incredibly, the headlights burst to life, dim, yellowish, but undeniably light. The effect on the approaching figure was immediate. It halted, seeming to recoil slightly, its form wavering at the edges like smoke disturbed by a draft. "The horn!" Olivia screamed. Ryan slammed his hand on the steering wheel center. A pathetic, strangled bleat emerged, then died. The battery was giving its last gasp, but the headlights stayed on, pinning the entity in their weak glare. "The gas, Ben!" Ryan shouted, fumbling for the lighter he always kept in the glove compartment. Ben ripped off a piece of his own t-shirt, stuffing it into the neck of the water bottle as a makeshift wick. His hands were shaking violently, splashing fuel. As the Watcher began to glide forward again, seemingly adjusting to the light, Ben shoved the bottle into Ryan's hand. "Do it!" Ryan flicked the lighter. Once, twice, a tiny flame sparked. He touched it to the gasoline-soaked rag. It ignited with a whoosh, creating a sudden bright flare of orange fire. Shielding his face, Ryan hurled the Molotov cocktail towards the entity. It arced through the air, landing short but splashing burning gasoline near the Watcher's feet. The figure jerked back violently, emitting a high-pitched grating shriek that scraped against their eardrums. The first sound they'd ever heard it make. It writhed, its shadowy form flickering erratically in the firelight, seeming to shrink away from the flames. But the fire was small, burning out quickly on the damp ground, and the headlights chose that moment to flicker and die completely, plunging them back into near darkness, lit only by the dying embers of the gasoline. The Watcher's shriek stopped. It stood still for a moment, its form coalescing back into solid shadow, and then it lunged forward with terrifying speed. The Watcher lunged, a terrifying vortex of shadow moving faster than thought. Ryan shoved Jessica behind the flimsy car door as Ben threw himself sideways, tackling Olivia to the ground, shielding her with his body. The entity seemed to sweep over the spot where they had been standing, the air turning deathly cold, accompanied by that high-pitched grating sound vibrating in their bones. But just as the darkness threatened to engulf them completely, a change occurred, a subtle shift in the quality of the night. High above the suffocating canopy, the first faint hint of dawn was breaking. A pale, grey light began to filter through. The dense leaves, almost imperceptible at first, but growing stronger. The Watcher seemed to falter. Its forward momentum ceased. It writhed, its shadowy form flickering violently, not from fire this time, but seemingly from the encroaching daylight itself. The grating sound intensified into what might have been a shriek of pain or rage. It recoiled, its form thinning, stretching, and then dissipated back into the deepest shadows beneath the trees, like smoke dissolving in the wind. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged gasps of the four friends. For a moment nobody moved, paralyzed by shock and disbelief. Then Ryan scrambled up, pulling Jessica with him. Ben helped Olivia to her feet, both trembling violently. "Did you see that?" Ben whispered, awestruck. "The light! It hated the light." "Let's not wait to find out if it comes back," Ryan urged. his voice raw. "Move, now, while we can see!" Hope, real this time, surged through them. Bolstered by the growing dawn light that pushed back the terrifying shadows, they half ran, half stumbled down the remainder of Whisper Creek Road. They didn't look back. The woods still felt oppressive, but the immediate predatory presence had lifted, retreating with the night. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, they saw it. The blessed sight of paved asphalt cutting across. The end of the dirt track. They burst out of the tree line onto the shoulder of Route 9, blinking in the grey morning light, like creatures emerging from a long hibernation. They had made it. They collapsed onto the grassy verge, exhausted, filthy, and utterly drained. Tears flowed freely now, tears of relief, terror, and grief for their lost innocence. They clung to each other, survivors of a nightmare made real. A few minutes later, the rumble of an approaching engine made them look up. An old pickup truck slowed down, the elderly driver peering at them with concern. He pulled over, rolling. Down his window. "You kids all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan could only nod numbly, the irony lost on him in his state of shock. They were safe, rescued, but as they climbed numbly into the truck, the terrifying images of the night, the suffocating darkness, the watching woods, the terrifying shape of the watcher were already burning themselves permanently into their minds. They had survived Whisper Creek Road, but a part of them would remain trapped on that haunted stretch of dirt forever. Weeks turned into a month. Ryan sat nursing a cold cup of coffee in his quiet apartment kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming. Through the window, he was seeing a therapist. They all were. Nightmares were frequent, sleep elusive. He rarely saw Ben or Olivia anymore. The shared trauma was a chasm between them. Jessica was trying, they both were, but the fear lingered, a phantom limb aching with memory. He looked out the window at the normal suburban street, telling himself it was over. He survived. They survived. It was just a road, just a bad memory. Then, glancing down at his coffee cup, he saw it. In the dark, reflective surface of the cold liquid, for just a fraction of a second, an impossibly tall, thin silhouette seemed to stand behind him, reflected not from the sunlit room, but from somewhere else, somewhere cold and dark. He whipped, a round, heart-pounding chair clattering against the floor. Nothing there, just the empty kitchen, bathed in morning light. But the chilling certainty remained. The watcher wasn't just on Whisper Creek Road anymore.